Well, grace and peace to you, brothers and sisters, and I hope that you are pressing on in the strength of the Lord in this real-life version of Groundhog Day. Many of you have probably seen that movie, the movie Groundhog Day starring Bill Murray, where he gets caught in this loop of living the same day every day, and he can't break out of that loop. And one of my favorite scenes from Groundhog Day is that alarm clock. Every morning, the alarm clock blasts out Sonny and Cher's "I've Got You, Babe." And he gets so tired of this song. Every morning he wakes up to the same song, and there's one scene where he takes that alarm clock and he utterly destroys it. And it feels so good to do that, only to have that same song blast out of the alarm clock, that same alarm clock the next morning as he repeats yet another day. Well, I don't know if you're like me, but when this shelter in place first started, it was a bit exciting. Dangerous, no doubt, and this virus is nothing to take lightly. But being with family the first few days, that was a pretty neat thing. But admittedly, and I can't pinpoint when this happened exactly, but I hit a wall with this shelter in place. And all of a sudden, the shelter in place had become cumbersome and redundant, boring. The same day over and over again, it had become and remains to this day tiresome. And now I think shelter in place is a kind of endurance test, an exercise in pressing on to the end. So what are you doing to keep up your endurance? Have you hit a wall? Well, if you're looking for something to do, especially something that has spiritual emphasis, I want to invite you to read something. If you would, this week, find some time to read the book of Hebrews. And I would encourage you to read Hebrews in one sitting. And the reason why Hebrews is such a good read in times like this is because Hebrews is written to a weary church. This group of believers had persecution before, and they actually had passed the test of persecution with flying colors. They were everything that the church would want to be. They stood firm in the face of adversity. But now there's this second wave of persecution that has hit the church, and the people have hit a wall. They have quit meeting together. Their time of worship, their confessions have become stale. And so the writer of Hebrews is doing a number of things to inspire them to press on in their faith. One of the things that he does is he connects their story of suffering, to the story of Christ. In fact, in Hebrews, Jesus is presented as the pioneer of our faith, the one who has gone before us, the one who suffered but also ascended. And we follow our pioneer. We follow his path that he has laid before us toward our reward and toward vindication. Also in Hebrews, we get the most extensive writings on Jesus as our great high priest, the one who can sympathize with every weakness that we have, and yet he was without sin. And our great high priest intercedes for his people, for the church. The writer of Hebrews then talks about the people who have gone before us, the Hall of Fame of faith, people who had to endure very dark situations, not knowing how it was going to turn out. All they could do was put their trust in God, and God saw them through. The world was not worthy of them. And finally, he talks about worship and the importance of meeting together, the importance of spurring one another on, encouraging one another, as all the more we see the day approaching. But what I want to do for the next minute is read a small section from Hebrews chapter 10 as a way of encouraging us this day. So hear these words from Hebrews 10, verses 32 and following. But recall the former days when, after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, and sometimes being partners with those so treated. For you had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. And then he gives a quotation from Isaiah and Habakkuk. For yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay, but my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. Yes, Groundhog Day is getting a bit old, but the mercies of God are new every morning. Let us not shrink back. Let us do what God has called us to do, even in these circumstances, and to be the people God has called us to be. Let us press on and endure and seek ways for God to be glorified in this pandemic. I would encourage you to start with the book of Hebrews and see where God takes you this week. Go in the grace of God. Press on, brothers and sisters in Christ at Brentwood Oaks.